The year is 1988. The room is paneled in dark wood, air thick with the smell of old paper and stale coffee. This is the annual meeting of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. A man named Marcus Thorne stands at the podium. He is the president of the largest agricultural bank in the state. He holds a single sheet of paper. He reads from it. His voice is confident. Then it falters. He stops. He brings the paper closer to his face. The room goes silent. He clears his throat. He starts again. Top performing ranching operation, net profit per acre, Vance Cattle Company. A murmur moves through the crowd. Thorne looks out at the faces. He sees confusion. He sees disbelief. He looks back at the paper, at the number. A profit margin that shouldn't be possible. Not in a drought year. Not with beef prices this low. He reads the next line. Input costs, 17% of regional average. The murmur stops. The silence is now absolute. 17%. It was a number that broke all the rules. It was a number that felt like an accusation. Thorne looks down at the front row. He sees an old man, Arthur Caldwell, retired now, used to run the small county bank in Sweetwater Creek. Caldwell isn't looking at the stage. He is staring at his own hands, folded on the table, because he remembers a different day, a different meeting, 20 years earlier, in a much smaller office, with a 16-year-old girl, a girl whose name was Vance, a girl he told it was impossible, a girl he refused, not out of malice, not out of cruelty, but out of kindness, out of certainty. This is the story of that girl, and the quiet 20-year war she fought, not against an enemy, but against a protector. This channel tells the stories of people who were told no, the builders, the innovators, the ones who proved the world wrong by simply doing the work. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe to this channel, because what happened to that girl in that bank changed not just her life, but the land itself, and the rules of an entire industry. Let me tell you about Alara Vance. Her story begins, as many do, with loss. It was 1968, a brutal Wyoming winter, the kind that steals the heat from your bones. The Vance family had ranched this land for 3 generations. They weren't wealthy, they weren't famous, they were just there, part of the landscape, like the sagebrush and the cottonwoods along the creek. Her father, John Vance, was a good man, quiet, capable. He understood the rhythms of the land. Her brother Thomas was 20, strong, ready to take his place. One Tuesday in February, they went out to check a fence line. A sudden blizzard rolled in off the mountains. Whiteout conditions, disorienting. They never came home. The truck was found 2 days later, slipped off a hidden washout. The funeral was small. The grief was immense. A silence fell over the Vance ranch, a silence that felt colder than the snow. Alara was 16. She was called Ellie. She was quiet like her father. She had his eyes and his determination. The community rallied, casseroles on the porch, neighbors offering to help with the herd, kind words, sad glances. Everyone assumed the same thing. Her mother, Mary, would sell. She would have to. A widow and a teenage girl. How could they possibly run a 2,000-acre cattle operation? It was unthinkable. It was tragic. But it was reality. The offers started coming in, polite, sympathetic, from neighbors who had known her father his whole life. Fair prices, they said. The best anyone could expect. Mary Vance sat at her kitchen table, the offers piled up next to the sympathy cards. She looked at her daughter. Ellie was staring out the window. Across the fields, her father had worked. Her grandfather had worked. She hadn't cried, not once since they found the truck. Her grief was a different shape. It was a stillness, a hardening. Mary asked her, "What do you want to do?" Ellie turned from the window. She looked at her mother. "We stay." Just that, 2 words. Mary searched her daughter's face, looking for the little girl she remembered. She was gone. In her place was someone else, someone older, someone forged in the quiet of those 2 days of waiting. Mary nodded. "Okay, we stay." But there was a problem, a big one. John Vance had taken out a loan the previous year from the Sweetwater County Bank, $30,000, to buy a new bull, to upgrade the haying equipment, an investment in the future, a future that was now gone. The note was due in 2 years, but the covenants of the loan were clear. In the event of the primary operator's death, the bank had the right to call the note, or to reevaluate the terms. The letter arrived a week after the funeral, polite, formal, requesting a meeting, to discuss the future of the Vance Cattle Company loan. Mary's hands shook as she read it. $30,000. It might as well have been $1 million. They had some savings. Not enough. Not even close. Selling the herd would cover it. But then the ranch would be an empty shell, a worthless piece of land without the stock to work it. Ellie took the letter from her mother. She read it. Her expression didn't change. "I'll go," she said. Mary protested. "No, I should." Ellie shook her head. "Dad took out the loan to run the ranch. I'm running the ranch now. I'll go." And so, on a cold March morning, 16-year-old Elara Vance drove her father's old Ford pickup into town. She wore her best dress. It felt like a costume. She walked into the Sweetwater County Bank, a place of quiet importance, marble floors, high ceilings, the smell of money and seriousness. She asked to see Mr. Caldwell, Arthur Caldwell, the bank president. He was a pillar of the community, served on the school board, coached the Little League team for 15 years. He had known Ellie's father since they were boys. He was a decent man. A good man. Everyone said so. The secretary looked at her, a hint of pity in her eyes. "He's expecting you, dear." She was shown into his office. It was warm, paneled in oak, pictures of his family on the desk, a photo of his Little League team on the wall. Arthur Caldwell stood up. He was a big man, soft around the middle. He had a kind face, wrinkles around his eyes from smiling. He did not smile now. His expression was one of deep, paternal concern. "Ellie," he said. His voice was gentle. "Come in. Sit down." She sat in the large leather chair opposite his desk. It swallowed her. She felt like a child playing dress-up. He offered her a glass of water. She shook her head. "No, thank you." He sat down, leaned forward, folded his hands on the desk. "Ellie, I was so sorry to hear about your father and your brother. A terrible, terrible thing. Your dad was a good man, one of the best." She just nodded. He sighed, a heavy, paternal sound. "Which brings us to this difficult business." He gestured to a file on his desk, the Vance file. He opened it. "Look, Ellie, I'm going to be straight with you. Your father was a good rancher, but he was carrying some debt. This note, $30,000. It's a substantial amount." She said nothing, just watched him, with those quiet, steady eyes. He continued, "Normally, with a viable operation, we'd work with the family, extend the terms, give you time. But the situation here, It's not viable. He said the word gently, but it landed like a stone. Not viable. Ellie's hands were clenched in her lap. She forced them to relax. "What do you mean?" she asked. Her voice was small, but it didn't tremble. Caldwell leaned back. He looked at her with profound sympathy. "Ellie, you're a 16-year-old girl. Your mother is a good woman, but she's never run the books. Ranching is a hard business, a man's business if we're being honest. It takes strength, it takes experience, it takes more than you have. And I say that with the greatest respect for you and your family." She felt a cold anger, different from her grief, sharper. "I can do it," she said. "I've worked alongside my father my whole life. I know the land. I know the cattle." He gave her a sad smile, the kind you give a child who says they can fly. "I know you do, honey. I've seen you out there. You're a hard worker. But this isn't about fixing a fence or driving a tractor. This is about managing a complex business. Commodity markets, feed costs, veterinary bills, debt service. It's a razor's edge even for experienced men." He leaned forward again. His voice dropped, became more confidential, more kind. "Listen to me. I am not going to be the man who lets John Vance's daughter fail. I am not going to be the man who presides over the bankruptcy of your family's legacy. I would never forgive myself, and your father would never forgive me." He thought he was being noble. He genuinely believed it. He was protecting her from herself, from reality, from a world that was too harsh for a girl. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who genuinely believed they were helping you. Someone who was certain about your limits. It's a different kind of wound. It doesn't make you angry, not in a way you can fight. It makes you feel small. It makes you feel invisible. If you've ever felt that, let us know in the comments. Because what Ellie did next wasn't born of anger. It was born of something colder, something more powerful. She looked at him, across the big desk, across the chasm of his certainty. "So what are you going to do?" she asked. Caldwell relaxed slightly. He thought she was finally understanding. "The best thing. The only thing. We help you sell the operation. The Hendersons have made a very fair offer. It will cover the note. It will leave you and your mother with a nice nest egg. You can move to town. You can finish school, go to college, have a real life. A good life. Not this struggle. It's what your father would have wanted." He said that last part with such conviction, such absolute certainty. And in that moment, something inside Ellie broke, and something else was forged in its place. She stood up. The chair seemed to release her. She was no longer a little girl in a big chair. She was just a presence. She looked down at Arthur Caldwell, the kind man, the pillar of the community, the protector. "You're wrong," she said. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact, as if she were telling him the sky was blue. He looked startled. "Ellie, my father would have wanted the ranch to continue. He would have trusted me to do it." She turned, walked toward the door, her back straight. Caldwell stood up. "Ellie, wait. Be reasonable. What are you going to do?" "The note is due. I can't just ignore it. I have a board of directors to answer to." She stopped at the door, her hand on the brass knob. She didn't turn around. "How long do I have?" He was flustered. Well, the terms say we can call it, but I'll give you 90 days, out of respect for your father. 90 days to find a buyer. No, she said. 90 days to get you your money. And then she walked out, leaving Arthur Caldwell standing in his warm, safe office, feeling something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger, it wasn't annoyance. It was a deep, unsettling pity. He truly felt sorry for her, for the pain she was about to face. He was so sure he was right. Certainty is a powerful thing. It can feel a lot like wisdom, but it's not. It's just the absence of doubt. Ellie drove home. The 10 miles of dirt road felt like 100. She didn't cry. The cold anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a single hard point of purpose. She walked into the kitchen. Her grandmother was there now, visiting from her small house in town. Her name was Elspeth. She was small and weathered, tough as old leather. She had come to Wyoming as a homesteader's wife in the 1920s. She had buried a child, survived the Depression, buried a husband. She knew about loss, and she knew about land. She was sitting at the table, oiling a piece of tack, her hands gnarled but steady. She looked up as Ellie came in, didn't ask, just waited. Ellie sat down, told her everything. The words came out flat, devoid of emotion, a simple reporting of the facts. He said a girl couldn't run it. He said he was protecting me. He gave us 90 days. When she was finished, the kitchen was silent, just the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Mary, her mother, put her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Elspeth put down the leather she was working on. She wiped her oily hands on a rag. Slowly, deliberately, she reached across the table and put her hand on Ellie's. Her skin was dry and cool. "The land doesn't care if you're a girl," she said. Her voice was raspy. "The land doesn't care how old you are. It only cares if you show up." She squeezed Ellie's hand. "They took everything from us in the Dust Bowl. The banks, the drought, everything except the dirt. The dirt is enough. Your father knew that. Now you do too. Let's get to work." And that was it. No more tears. No more discussion of selling. The decision was made. That night, Ellie pulled out her father's old ledger, a thick, leather-bound book. His precise, blocky handwriting filled the pages. Dates, numbers, notes in the margins. Hay crop light this year. Market price down. Henderson's bull broke the fence again. It was the story of the ranch, the story of her father's life, written in numbers. She turned to a fresh page. At the top she wrote, Day 1. She drew a line down the middle. On one side, debt, $30,000. On the other side, assets. She started to list them. Cattle, land, equipment. But then she stopped. She thought about what her grandmother had said. She crossed it all out and wrote one word, land. The next morning, she was up before dawn. She met with the one ranch hand who had stayed on, an old cowboy named Silas. He had worked for her grandfather. He was loyal to the bone. He was packing his things, assumed he was let go. Ellie stopped him. "I'm not selling, Silas. I'm running it." He looked at her. This old man with a face like a dried-up riverbed. He saw the look in her eye. He slowly unpacked his bag. "All right, boss. What's the plan?" She opened the ledger. The plan is to survive. For the next 90 days they worked. And this is where the story gets interesting. Because Ellie couldn't afford to run the ranch the way her father had, the way all her neighbors did. She couldn't afford the thousands of dollars in supplemental feed. The constant rotation of vaccines and antibiotics. The diesel for the tractors to haul hay all winter. She had no money. She had no credit. The bank had made sure of that. So she had to find another way. Silas came to her one evening. He was hesitant. "Boss, your granddaddy, he used to do something different. Before all this modern stuff. He called it mob grazing." He pointed out at the vast pasture. "Right now, the cattle wander everywhere. They eat the good grasses. They leave the tough stuff. They trample the ground. Your granddaddy, he'd fence off a small piece, just a few acres, put the whole herd in there for one day. They'd eat everything, the good, the bad. They'd stomp the rest into the ground. Their hooves would break up the soil. Their manure would fertilize it. Then you move them, every single day, the next patch over. You don't come back to that first patch for months. By the time you do, it's grown back, thicker, healthier, deeper roots." The neighbors all laughed at him for it, called him crazy, said it was too much work. Ellie listened. It made a kind of intuitive sense. Work with the land, not against it. Mimic the old herds of buffalo. But they didn't have miles of permanent fences. How could they afford to build them? "We don't build them permanent," Silas said. "We use temporary wire, a few posts, a single strand of electric fence. You can move it in an hour." It was a radical idea, labor-intensive, unconventional. It went against everything modern ranching stood for, which was about spending money to save time. Ellie had no money, but she had time, and she had Silas, and she had a desperation that fueled them both. They started the next day. They spent what little cash they had on a solar fence charger and rolls of polywire. They divided the first big pasture into 2-acre paddocks. Every morning before the sun was fully up, Ellie and Silas would be out there, moving the wire, opening a new paddock. The cattle, at first confused, quickly learned the routine. They'd line up at the gate of the new pasture, eager for the fresh grass. The neighbors watched from the road. They'd slow their trucks, shake their heads. That poor Vance girl lost her mind, making all that work for herself, playing with string in a field. Arthur Caldwell heard the talk in the town diner. He felt a pang of sadness. He had been right. She was in over her head. He drove out past the Vance place one afternoon. He saw her out there, a small figure in a huge landscape, dragging a roll of wire, her face smudged with dirt. He didn't stop. What could he say? He just shook his head and drove on, confident in his pity. But something was happening on the Vance ranch, something the neighbors couldn't see from the road. Ellie was keeping meticulous records in the ledger. Her input costs plummeted. She wasn't buying hay. The cattle were grazing stockpiled grass. She wasn't buying fuel to haul it. Her veterinary bills dropped. The cattle were healthier, eating a more diverse diet, moving away from their own parasites every day. The land started to change, slowly at first, then with astonishing speed. The overgrazed patches began to heal. New species of grass started to appear. Grasses Silas hadn't seen in 30 years. The ground became softer. It held water instead of shedding it. The 90 days came and went. Ellie sold off a small portion of the herd, the older cows, the less productive ones. She got a decent price. They were healthy, grass-fed. She walked into the Sweetwater County Bank on the 89th day. She went to the teller, not to the president's office. She deposited the money from the cattle sale. Then she wrote a check for the full quarterly loan payment, plus a little extra against the principal. The teller looked at the check, then at Ellie. Her face was a mixture of shock and confusion. She took it, stamped it. The machine whirred. A quiet act of defiance. Ellie didn't say a word. She just took her receipt and left. That payment sent a ripple through the bank. Arthur Caldwell saw the transaction report. He stared at it. He had been so sure. He had been so certain. Maybe she got lucky, a one-time thing. She'd miss the next one. She didn't. For the next 2 years, Ellie Vance did the impossible. She ran the ranch, she and Silas, just the two of them. She finished high school, doing her homework at the kitchen table after a 12-hour day on the ranch. The ledger became her Bible. Every cost, every profit, every rainfall, every paddock rotation, recorded in her neat, precise hand. The community was split. Some still whispered she was crazy, running on fumes, bound to fail. Others began to watch with a grudging respect. Her cattle were looking better than theirs, fatter, shinier coats, and she wasn't buying feed. How was she doing it? The numbers told the story. Her cost to produce a pound of beef was a fraction of her neighbors'. They were leveraged to the hilt. Bank loans for bigger tractors, bigger barns, more chemicals, more fertilizer. They were trapped in a cycle of spending money to make money. Ellie had broken the cycle because she'd had no choice. She was running a different kind of business, based on grass, not on diesel. Based on observation, not on chemicals. Based on her grandmother's simple wisdom. The land only cares if you show up. She showed up, every single day. 1 year and 11 months after she first walked into Arthur Caldwell's office, on a Tuesday in February, almost 2 years to the day her father and brother had died, Ellie Vance walked back into the Sweetwater County Bank. She was 18 now, not a girl anymore. She was a young woman, weathered, confident. She asked to see Mr. Caldwell. This time, the secretary's eyes held no pity. They held something like awe. She was shown into the same office. Arthur Caldwell stood. He looked older, more tired. The kind smile was gone, replaced by a look of wary respect. "Ellie," he said. She didn't sit down. She walked to his desk. She took an envelope from her jacket pocket. She placed it on his desk. "It's a cashier's check," she said, "for the remaining balance of the loan. $24,152.17. He stared at the envelope. He couldn't bring himself to touch it. "How?" he whispered. "Everyone's struggling. The prices are terrible. How did you do this?" She looked at him. No triumph in her eyes. No, "I told you so." Just a quiet, unshakable calm. "You told me I couldn't, so I had to find a way. You were worried about the risk. You just misjudged where the real risk was." She turned and walked out of the office, leaving him alone with the paid-off note and the shambles of his certainty. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. But that's not the end of the story, because this is where it becomes bigger than one girl and one ranch. This is where it becomes a legacy. The next 10 years were a quiet revolution. Ellie Vance kept working. She kept refining her grazing methods. Her land became an oasis. The soil, dark and rich, teeming with life. The grass, a thick, diverse carpet that stayed green weeks longer than her neighbors. Then the drought of the mid-70s hit. It was long, brutal. The price of feed skyrocketed. Ranchers who relied on it were crushed. They were selling off their herds at a loss, selling their land for pennies on the dollar to cover their banknotes. The very neighbors who had pitied Ellie, who had shaken their heads at her string fences, started coming to her, hats in hand. Not for advice, it was too late for that. They came to ask if she would buy their land. She bought her first neighboring parcel in 1975, the old Henderson place, 800 acres. She looked at the owner, a man her father's age, his face etched with defeat. "I don't have much, Ellie." She looked at the land, parched, cracked, overgrazed for decades. But she knew what it could be. She opened her ledger, showed him her profits. She made him an offer, a fair one, more than anyone else would pay. She wrote him a check, cash. She didn't borrow a dime. The next year, 1976, the Miller place to the south, 1,200 acres. The family was moving to California. Their son didn't want the life. She paid cash. By 1980, Vance Cattle Company was 5,000 acres. She hired more people, taught them her methods. The land began to heal, paddock by paddock, acre by acre. The sagebrush receded. The grasslands returned. 1982, the Peterson Ranch, 2,500 acres. He was retiring. His kids were doctors and lawyers. They thought he was crazy to have stayed so long. Ellie walked the land with him. He showed her where the springs used to be. "I'll bring them back," she told him. She paid cash. Arthur Caldwell, from his desk at the bank, watched it all unfold. He saw the deeds recorded at the courthouse. Vance, Vance, Vance. He saw her accounts, the deposits growing. No loans, no debt, just a relentless, quiet expansion, fueled by grass and sunlight. He had been the gatekeeper. He had held the key, and he had refused to turn it. He thought he was locking her out, to protect her. Instead, he had locked her out of a failing system. He had forced her to build a new one, a better one. He retired in 1985, a celebrated career, a pillar of the community. But he knew, deep down, he knew he had been profoundly, fundamentally wrong. His certainty had been a form of blindness, his kindness a form of arrogance. Which brings us back to that meeting. In 1988, the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, Marcus Thorne at the podium, stunned into silence by a single number, 17%. The entire room is looking at Arthur Caldwell. He feels their eyes on him. He knows what they're thinking. He was her banker. He must have been the one who backed her, the visionary who saw her potential. He could have taken the credit, smiled, nodded, accepted the silent praise. But 20 years of watching her succeed from a distance had changed him. It had eroded his certainty, replaced it with a grudging, painful humility. Someone in the back of the room asks the question everyone is thinking. Who is Vance Cattle Company? Never heard of them. Are they even here? Thorne looks at the sheet again. Principal operator, Ilara Vance. A woman's name. The silence in the room deepens. Then Arthur Caldwell stands up. He is old now. His hands tremble slightly. He is no longer the confident paternal man in the oak-paneled office. He is just an old man with a heavy conscience. He clears his throat. His voice is quiet, but it carries in the still room. "I can tell you about her," he said. And he does. He tells them everything. He tells them about the day in his office. He tells them what he said to her, a 16-year-old girl. He tells them how he refused her, how he tried to make her sell, how he told her it was a man's world, how he told her he was protecting her. His voice doesn't waver. It is the flat, unsparing confession of a man settling a long overdue debt. "I was wrong," he says. "I was wrong about her. I was wrong about the land. I was wrong about everything. She didn't succeed because of the banking system. She succeeded in spite of it. She didn't learn from us. We need to learn from her." He sits down. The silence that follows is different. It's not confusion anymore. It's understanding. It's awe. It is the sound of an entire room full of men realizing the rules they lived by were a choice, not a necessity. Ellie wasn't at the meeting. She was at home, on the ranch. She heard about it later. Silas told her. He'd heard it from a friend. She just nodded. She went to the old barn, to the small office she had built in the corner. On the wall, there was a single framed piece of paper. It was the paid-in-full receipt for that first loan, the one she paid off before she turned 20. Next to it hung her father's old ledger. She opened it. The pages were filled now, decades of work, of showing up. Her life written in numbers. She turned to the very back. Her grandmother Elspeth had died in 1985. Before she passed, she had written something on the last page of the ledger. Her handwriting was shaky. "The land remembers." Ellie traced the words with her finger. The land remembers who shows up. The legacy of Alara Vance is not in the thousands of acres she reclaimed. It's not in the profit margins that stunned an industry. It's in what she did next. She created the Elspeth Trust, named for her grandmother. It wasn't a charity, it was a private investment fund, a bank of sorts. It gave out low-interest loans to young people who wanted to get into ranching, especially young women, especially people who had been turned down by traditional banks. The loans had conditions. You couldn't buy huge, expensive equipment. You had to use rotational grazing. You had to work to restore the soil. You had to keep a ledger, just like hers. The trust didn't just give money, it gave knowledge. Ellie and her team would mentor each young rancher, teach them the methods she had learned. The first loan went to a young couple in Montana. The bank had told them their business plan was unrealistic. The second, to a young woman in Colorado whose family wanted her to sell her inherited land. The third, to a veteran in Nebraska who wanted to heal the land and himself. One by one, year by year, the seeds of Ellie's quiet revolution began to spread. Today, there are dozens of ledger ranches across the American West. Oases of green in a landscape of brown. They are more resilient to drought, more profitable, more alive. They are run by a new generation, a generation that knows the land doesn't care who you are. It only cares if you show up. Alara Vance is in her 70s now. She still lives on the ranch. She still walks the paddocks. She still watches the grass grow. The old Vance home is a museum now, and a learning center. In the kitchen, on the old wooden table, sits her father's ledger, open to the first page she wrote in. Debt, $30,000. And on the other side, the word she wrote that day. Land. Tour guides, young ranchers from the trust, tell the story. They point to the word. They say she understood something everyone else had forgotten, that the land wasn't just a resource to be exploited. It was the source of everything, the fundamental asset, the only thing that truly mattered. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting in an office, across a desk from a person in a position of power, a banker, a boss, a teacher, a parent. And that person is kindly and with deep, genuine concern explaining to them what their limits are. They are being told no, for their own good. This story is for them. It's a reminder that the most dangerous limitations are the ones others place on you out of love. A reminder that certainty is not wisdom. And a reminder that sometimes the only way to fight a protector is to go out and prove them wrong. Not with words, but with decades of quiet, unrelenting work. If this story means something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's possible. Someone who is facing their own version of a closed door. And subscribe for more stories of the quiet revolutionaries who reshape our world. Because the land remembers, and so should we.